So anyway, I had planned this podcast, right? And then that son of a bitch, BQ, my brother from another mother, um, puts out his video. And I was like, and sometimes like when he puts out his stuff, I won't listen until after I'm done doing mine, because what I don't want to do is steal his shit. Because like you could do that subconsciously, right? Like you can hear a good idea and then forget about it, and then like subconsciously regurgitate that idea as if it were your own, and then it's like now you're stealing someone else's stuff. So I've done that before, and I was like, oh damn it, I should, like, I didn't mean to do that. You know what I mean? And but I just didn't have anything else to listen to. And I was like, you know what? We're probably not going to have the same ideas. I don't know why I thought that, because we always have the same ideas. But I went ahead and listened to it, and it was like beat for beat. Everything that I wanted to talk about, he talked about. I was like, God damn it, BQ. I even called him out in my group chat. I was like, dude, like I was literally going to say all that stuff. And then so part of me was like, I don't even want to do this anymore. But he encouraged me, and the other was like, no, just keep doing it. So hopefully you guys will have forgotten that he already said all this stuff. And you guys will think that I'm actually, I have my own ideas. So I did try to switch up. We're not completely like clones of each other. We do like different things in pro wrestling, but our ideas for how Impact should grow and how Impact can be better, we're in lockstep. And he's talked about it before, and I've talked about it. It's that I think it comes from just being, being military leaders, right? I've been taught that you never settle in the military. At the end of the year, when you're looking at all the things you did good, you talk about those things, but where your real focus areas are is where you didn't do very well, right? The metrics that weren't as good, and the metrics that were good, you focus on making those even better, right? Case in point, I was talking, we just had a big meeting with my command team at the hospital that I work at, or the clinic. It's actually a clinic. The clinic that I work at. And we were kind of just talking about like what a great year it was. But we're looking at some of our metrics, and we're like, during access to care, is it this percent, right? But we knew that it could be better, right? It was like, oh yeah, we beat last year's percentage by like, whatever, like 3 to 5%, something like that. It's like, but we can do even better, right? We can have more access for our patients. And here's the plan to get there, right? So that's our new 2025 mission statement is to increase access to care, right? Another 2025 mission statement, SMART goal, if you will, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely, is to get our medical readiness. So medical readiness stands for is like, we have all of these different exams and like vaccines and shots and all these other things, and surveys and mental health surveys and these different things that you have to do every year, is to be, we have to get our certain percentage up. So what we want to do is like, you have to check all these boxes before you're able to deploy, right? And we want everybody to have all those boxes checked at all times, right? So we don't want anybody to come overdue, but people do. People get busy, it's hard to get into sometimes. And then other times people are just like, they don't care about it and they're lazy and they just don't get it done. So we want to get our readiness stats, our medical readiness stats, to be way up. So, I mean, the goal, like the ultimate goal is always to be at 100 at all times, but that's just not a realistic goal. So we set like what we thought was a realistic goal, and it's a significant improvement upon last year, even though last year was actually pretty good compared to the other bases that are in the Pacific region, right? So we look at those stats and like, how do we get there? What's the map to get to that? How do we attain those goals, right? So while we had a good year, we're looking at next year as to be better than we were this past year. And that is just a natural mindset for military leader to be in. But I think that's also in any corporate environment too. And so that's why I'm always constantly looking at ways to improve. 2024 was the best year as far as business wise for TNA in Anthem TNA history. But I don't think it's all that far off from TNA history. Right. I know they had some really good years under Jared and Dixie, especially the Spike years. But I don't think they ever did ticket sales like they did this year, because TNA was almost always at the Impact Zone. And they did go on the road for the pay-per-views, but not always. A lot of times the pay-per-views were even at the Impact Zone. So a big part of their business model was not really selling tickets. And then their pay-per-views, aside from a handful, they hardly ever went above 25,000. And we had 3 this year that went above 25,000, and 1 that broke the all-time record of over 65,000. So I think it's, one of the strongest years in TNA history, not Anthem on, it's TNA in general. Now the television ratings don't even compare to what they had during the Spike years, right? But I think that there is room for a lot of improvement coming up this year, despite the fact they're coming off their best year. Now I'm going to switch my list here. I actually had some of the stuff jotted down. But so as we get into 2025, the company finds itself at a pivotal moment. With a resurgence of popularity following its rebranding to TNA, stronger pay-per-view numbers, new television deals in Canada and other territories, the brand has built significant momentum heading into the new year. Yet despite these achievements, there's much to be done to solidify its place as a major player in the industry. Here are some TNA Wrestling's New Year's resolutions for 2025, detailing the path forward to ensure the brand continues its upward trajectory. We got to continue growing the brand, right? That's the important part. Now, I had number 1. I'm going to switch that. I just want to get this one right out of the way. So I've switched my list up. Number 1, and we're going to get it. At first I wasn't even going to talk about this, but I think it's important to talk about it. It was the thing that goes without saying, but they have to secure a U.S. television deal. I know India would be big. UK would be big. They're already on television in the U.S., but they have to upgrade that deal. Access TV has been a solid home for TNA. It got them back on stable footing. But I think it got them back on too stable of a footing. And when Scott D'Amore signed that deal, like a year in, he was like, now we don't have a metaphorical gun to our head anymore. And that was a stressful thing for them when they were on Pop, right? They constantly had a gun to their head, and it was making them perform. So it's like, I think they need that again, because that's what was yes, it got them back to stability, right? To be on a TV channel, a small channel owned by their parent company. So they weren't likely to get canceled. If they got canceled, they were just going out of business, right? So, but because they were the number 1 show on the network, even if they didn't really fit into that network, what that network's model was anymore, despite the fact that pro wrestling and MMA really built that station, but that's another story. The Mark Cuban era of HDNet. They were resting on their laurels for a long time. And Scott D'Amore said it. We don't have a metaphorical gun to our heads. We can breathe. I think they breathed for too long, and Anthem grew tired of that ideology. They wanted more and more and more, and so they had to get Scott out of the way to get more and more and more. And what more looks like was either growing access, which they have not been able to do because cable is declining year over year, and there's not an appetite for more channels. There certainly is not an appetite for another music station. There is not an appetite for a music channel. That's unfortunate, because I grew up on MTV when they still had music, and Fuse, right? It used to be called Much Music in Canada. They changed it to Fuse. VH1, like they are no longer music channels. CMT. I think CMT like shows movies. It's like they show movies and TV shows. Like they don't even really show music anymore. So Access TV was supposed to be that, to fill that void, and it just never really grew, right? So the two entities could not grow together. TNA has outgrown Access. So it is time for TNA to go. It is time for TNA to get on a bigger network. I think that Fox still wants pro wrestling. I know they canceled SmackDown. They were in negotiations with AEW, but AEW is not going there until they get to a certain price because they have overextended their infrastructure. Rampage got canceled because of that. Like that's because like there was no real reason to watch Rampage because they could not make it an entertaining show on a regular basis to get people to make it priority viewing. They just don't have that ability. They don't have that skill set. They don't have the infrastructure in place to have a third show be interesting. So if AEW is going to go to any network, they're going to ask for a certain number because their brand, their infrastructure has to grow with it, right? So I still think Fox, not big Fox like for TNA, but I still think Fox wants pro wrestling. I think Hulu still wants pro wrestling. I think that CBS Sports would take pro wrestling, right? I think there's actual networks out there, but it has to be for the right price. And so TNA is not going to ask for anything close to what AEW would ask for. But I think that if they got on Fox Sports 1, I don't think that the ratings for a C-level AEW show and TNA's A-level Impact show, I don't think the ratings would be that dramatically different, but the price would be different. So I think that there's a market there. I think that it's there. It's weird saying that considering, Rampage just got canceled and New Japan just got canceled, but I think there's some momentum there. I think the production is there. I think they have everything that they need in place to move to a larger network. And there's networks out there that could use 52 weeks of consistent programming. I think it's there. So anyway, I wanted to get that out of the way. That goes without saying. Like that's like an annual thing. It's like you got to get off access. You got to get off access. So I don't want to waste too much time on that. All right, back to my original number one. Make creative again. So while 2024 saw major financial and branding successes for TNA, the creative output left much to be desired. The booking, though stable, felt formulaic. It was paint by numbers booking every time. Like I could predict the storylines as they play out, especially with that TNA Knockouts division. It has been the same story for 3 years. They form a tag team, right? And then to get a tag team title shot, they do a series of singles matches, and then they get the tag team title shot. They win the tag team titles, and then the previous tag team champ, they do a couple rematches, and then the previous tag team champions disband, and a lot of times their contracts are expired and they go to another company. That has happened time and time again, right? For the world title. If there's no heat for the world title, like if it's babyface, at some point, like probably the week before the match is about to happen, they're going to be a tag team. That's how they're going to set it up. And then the following week, they're going to do a contract signing. And the same thing for the knockouts. Like they're going to team up, or they're going to be on opposing tag team matches, and then they're going to do a contract signing, and then they're going to have the pay-per-view match. It's as bland can be. They haven't really done any creative that pushes the boundaries. They're too reliant on safe, predictable tropes. For a company with a history of pushing boundaries and delivering fresh storytelling, they got to reinvigorate the creative process. They need a creative team overhaul. You got to evaluate whoever's on the team and inject some fresh minds into the process. They need to hire people that understand TNA's DNA and can bring innovative approach to storytelling. I look at some of the innovative concepts that Deadlock Pro Wrestling and Pro Wrestling Revolver are doing. And I know Sam McCallahan, he's there. I see what they're doing, and I'm just like, why can't TNA do some of this stuff? I know booking indies and booking a weekly television show are two different things. I'm not saying they should be the head bookers, but you got to bring those guys in. You got to bring those guys into the room, because the people that are there are resting on their laurels. And Delirious is a paint by numbers, bland, boring guy. That's what he did for Ring of Honor. And it was killing Ring of Honor. And they ended up dying. like Ring of Honor's dead. And then you brought their head booker in, And like while you've had record number of success, I think that's been in contrast with the creative process, right? You need more episodic storytelling. Move away from disjointed matches and focus on long-term layered narratives. Great companies wrestling thrives on emotional investment, and TNA is talent. TNA has a talent to deliver that. The big moments matter. Focus on creating unforgettable moments, resonate with the fans, and encourage social media buzz. Whether it's shocking debut, gripping promo, draw dropping matches, give the fans a reason to talk, right? But don't give them moments that aren't connected to the storylines. Like these are like you need episodic storytelling week to week that builds. You need anticipation, right? You need story and anticipation that leads to a big moment, that leads to a big match. You can't just keep having like, hey, you won a 6-way match and now you're the number one contender, right? Like that's just how they always do it. We need heat. We need hate. We need heat. We need blood feuds. That's what people want to see in pro wrestling, right? Unscripted, off the rails promos, wild storylines. Like that's what gets people back invested into your weekly episodic television. While the major events have been successes, the TV show has not grown at all. The weekly TV show is not bigger. You've been able to attract casual fans to come to your live events through the partnership with WWE, Joe Hendry getting hot, and the Hardy Boys signing, but that has not translated to ratings, right? Now, mainly because Access is dead, but you're still down year over year, looks significantly, and a lot of it is because of this predictable booking, right? There's no real reason to watch the TV show. There isn't. You're not hooking the audience in every single week. You need stuff like that. The matches are great. I love great matches. I'm a great match guy. But BQ said it on his podcast. TNA is a place for storylines. We need 50-50 storylines and great matches. We need it to be well balanced. That's what TNA was built on. Speaking of which, you need to be unapologetically TNA. In the past, TNA made its mark by taking creative risks, unique gimmicks, characters, and storylines, whether it was, and match concepts. We need to take risks, invest in characters and storylines that break the mold and bring back the wild gimmicks and storytelling and unique match concepts that defined early TNA. We need to bring back classic TNA match types. We have Ultimate X ad nauseum. We didn't have King of the Mountain this past year. We haven't had cage matches in 5 years, which I'll get to a little bit later. We haven't had Elevation X. And then, of course, we haven't really had a new match concept in a while. We had the X Division Revolver match, and we haven't done that in a while. Sami Callihan and Eric Young a couple years ago did the Double Jeopardy match where each member had to bleed before you can get a finish. We haven't done that in a while. But instead, it's like every fucking taping, we have a different type of street fight named after the city that they're in. And it's the same thing. It's just cookie sheets, tables, and trash can lids. Take some risks. Be unapologetically TNA, right? And then we need characters. Characters drive stories. Focus on developing larger-than-life personalities who can transcend the squared circle. We need characters. We have some, but we're not focusing on them. What is their why? What is Joe Hendry's goal? He said he wants the world title, but let's talk about his journey to get there, right? NXT did that with Joe Hendry, and he was only there for a few weeks. We still haven't done that with TNA, right? He still didn't even appear to be all that mad that he got screwed over at Bound for Glory. He was a little bit mad, but he's back teaming with Nick Nemeth like it ain't no thing, right? He's saving Nick Nemeth from a beatdown like it ain't no thing. We needed in-depth characters that people can sink their teeth into. And we need TNA to just be TNA, right? Be creative, take risks. We need TNA to be TNA. Focus on unsigned talent. Every time somebody gets fired from WWE, there's always the question of whether or not TNA should bring them in. I'm almost always like a no. Unless I see them out there working and hustling on the indies for a while, because I'm just like, you just don't want to bring, and it's usually like these mid-carders that wouldn't really bring any value, but they would still come at a premium price. So I don't want to see them until after they've been on the indies for like 6 months, right? And I think we've seen that with Donovan Dijak and Trevor Lee specifically, whom I think they should bring in. I also think that they should bring in Tegan Knox like right off of free agency, because I just feel like the Knockouts division would need her. But a guy like Baron Corbin, you wait, right? You wait on that guy. You see if he's still got that hunger. So that's kind of where I'm at with former WWE talent. Unless they're like a major star, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But these mid card former WWE, mid card former AEW talents, unless you have like this great idea, or unless they're already affiliated with the brand, right? They're a homegrown star like Santana was. You just stay away, right? Focus on unsigned talent. Tito Escondido, bad dude Tito, right? Titus Alexander, Kevin Blackwood. Focus on those type of people. Focus on some of the women that have been working dark matches for your company at all these different stops. Focus on them. And there's so many good ones that you can be bringing in instead of your Ash by Elegances, whom I think has been a net negative. I know I just talked about focusing on characters. She is a character. She's an over-the-top character. I like that part. But she comes in, everybody's like, oh, that's just Dana Brooke, right? Who was terrible in WWE for a long time. Get the hint. Stay away from Indy Hartwell. We don't need her. There are a million Indy Hartwells on the indies right now. You could bring in who's just as good, probably a lot better, actually, that won't cost you a premium price that you can grow. TNA has always been at its best when it creates its own stars. In recent years, the company has relied heavily on free agents from WWE and AEW. While these talents have added credibility, they haven't necessarily driven long-term growth. It's time to focus on discovering and cultivating the next generation of stars. Scouting and development. Here's your plan. Scouting and development. Actively scout independent wrestling promotions for unsigned talent with potential. Invest in developmental systems and give these wrestlers a platform to grow. Showcase your homegrown stars. And avoid your over-reliance on AEW and ex-WWE stars. What is your company's identity? It's always your homegrown talent. Always. What was the TNA identity in the mid-2000s? Samoa Joe, Christopher Daniels, AJ Styles, Frankie Kazarian, Chris Sabin, Alex Shelley, right? That's what people always identified TNA with. And they do to this day. I think Kurt Angle eventually became a TNA guy, but he was, for the most part, always seen as an ex-WWE guy. Sting eventually became a TNA guy, but he's almost like now he's remembered as the like WCW Sting, right? He's always going to be like the WCW guy, right? The stars that you create yourself, that you cultivate, that you develop, that you build, are what's going to be identified with your company always. AEW is going through that right now. They're having an identity crisis because Tony Khan cannot stay away from the cookie jar. He sees these new action figures that get fired from WWE that he grew up watching, and they're available now. He wants them, right? And they have not added anything to his company. In fact, they've detracted from the company. I love Edge. He's great. He's great in AEW, but he has not added to the company. I love Shelton Benjamin and Bobby Lashley and MVP. They're not adding to the company. They're taking away, right? What is that company's identity? It's Hangman. It's the Young Bucks. It's Kenny Omega. It's the people that started the company that they've grown. It's Daniel Garcia. It's Darby Allin. As much as I don't really like it, but Jack Perry, right? And the Lucha Brothers, whom they just lost. That's what people identify AEW with. They don't identify AEW with these former WWE guys. They identify AEW with the talent that they started with and that they developed and that they cultivated and that they built, right? I think that very rare occasions does a wrestler remove the branding from their previous employer, right? Especially when they've been with WWE. It takes a long time. I think FTR has done that, and I think John Moxley has done that, to where I actually forget that he was Dean Ambrose at times, right? But for the most part, when you were introduced to the wrestling world, right, when you built your name in WWE, that name never leaves you. It takes a long time to remove that name from the lexicon. And that's why you got to scout and develop talent. You got to build them from the ground up, because they become your identity. Take care of your people. They lost Speedball. They're about to lose Jordan Grace and Josh Alexander. But those are your people. You developed those. You built those talents. Speedball had a big name from the indies for a long time, but he was never really on television. He is identified with TNA, right? He is a TNA homegrown talent. I know it's going to upset some people, but he is. Okay. You're losing all three of them in one fell swoop, and you're very likely to replace them with former WWE star. Well, Tessa Blanchard is a TNA. She's the one that's replacing Jordan Grace. But you got to take care of those stars, right? Those are the ones you got to focus on. Jordan Grace and Speedball are gone. You gotta keep Josh, right? And you gotta compete with AEW and WWE and fend them off and keep these talent happy. Part of that is doing what I'm talking about, not stop the over reliance on former WWE talent and former AEW talent coming in and taking away spots from your current roster, from the roster that you built, your homegrown stars. They can come in and they can weave their way in and they can work their way up, but you can't come in and push them ahead of your own people, which is what they typically do, right? We got to get these stars on long-term, like homegrown, cemented contracts, because when you develop your own star and they become part of your identity, right? There is a pride that goes with that. Like, hey, look, I was born here, I was created here, I want to stay here, right? As long as you keep paying them and keeping them happy, that's the way it's going to be. And they will fly the flag for you. All these former AEW and WWE stars, they're looking at TNA as a pit stop. They're just there to get themselves back up to as a transition hub for them to get back into the limelight of WWE and AEW. They don't care about your brand. They don't care about your fan base. They don't care about anything other than that short-term paycheck, a place to hang their hat for a little bit, to get back to AEW and to get back to WWE. And for a lot of them, it might not ever happen, but for some of them it does, right? There are so many more Matt Cardonas that are just using TNA to get to AEW and to WWE than there are Eddie Edwardses out there that actually believe in the brand, that like being there, they're happy, they're making good money, and they have pride in company and they want to build that company and make it grow, right? There's far more Matt Cardonas than there are Eddie Edwardses. Focus on the Eddie Edwardses. Take care of your people. Be competitive in free agency. Now, I know this is a contradiction to focus on unsigned talent. I'm not talking about your mid-level former WWE, mid-level AEW fireds, right? I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about big names. Like, I'm talking about Jordan Grace and Josh Alexander, like your homegrown people. But when a big name wrestler becomes a free agent, TNA's name rarely comes up as a serious option. And I did this whole rant last year, and I'm not going to do it again. But last year, when CM Punk and Will Ospreay and Okada were all becoming free agents, TNA, Scott D'Amore specifically, was getting TNA's name out there as possible destinations for all three of them, and they laughed at you. They laughed at TNA. And you proved them right whenever they did not come, right? You threw the name out there like that was an actual option, and it never was an option. Not a single one of them ever thought once about coming to TNA. Will Ospreay said he was, just to be nice, but he signed with AEW 2 months before his New Japan contract expired. There's going to be more free agents this year from WWE and AEW that are not people that got fired, right? They're people whose contracts are expiring that want another destination. TNA needs to get one, just one. Prove to the audience that you're serious, that you're a serious player in the industry, and prove to the rest of the industry that you're a serious player. To shake off the stigma of being a joke, TNA must surprise the industry by landing a major free agent in 2025. Target strategic free agents. Go after wrestlers who not only have name value, but also align with TNA's long-term vision. Somebody that could fit in with TNA, that can do TNA stuff, right? That would be a part of the team that would want to help it grow. So don't bring in somebody on a 6-month deal that is just looking to go back to WWE, right? Sign someone like when Kurt Angle became a free agent, they strategically signed him to like a 5-year deal because they're going to build the whole company around him. That was the way to go. Make competitive offers and showcase the brand, right? Let's do it. Bring back cage matches. TNA hasn't had a cage match since 2019. 2019 is the last time they had a cage match. It's unfathomable. I see cage matches all over the indies. I see cage matches in Wrestling Revolver, which is Sami Callihan's promotion. There's no reason why TNA can't have a cage match. And in fact, not only do I want steel cage matches back, I want Lethal Lockdown back. AEW has their version of War Games. WWE does War Games. MLW does a War Games. TNA's Lethal Lockdown, I felt, was the most creative of all of them. And it always added to a buy rate. I think they should bring back Lethal Lockdown for Rebellion. I think they should. You don't have to have a full pay-per-view of cage matches. I thought that ended up like kind of hurting that brand. So the Lockdown pay-per-view, I know some people want it to come back. If they did bring it back, it'd be a TNA Plus special. But if they just want to bring back Lethal Lockdown, I say just bring that back to Rebellion. You're going to have to fill up the Galen Center. It doesn't have to be there. You don't do 2 rings, but the image of the cage coming down from the ceiling, the top of the cage with all the weapons attached to it, that's such a cool visual. That goes back to my other point, be unapologetically TNA. That was the cool, unique thing about TNA, was these creative, wild, crazy ideas that Jeff Jarrett had that worked, right? It's been a long time since you had it. If you want to sell those tickets in the Galen Center, you bring back Lockdown, right? And you bring back steel cage matches. We need like 2 or 3 steel cage matches for a year, right? There's nothing better than a world title match in a steel cage. Bring it back. And lastly, and I'm going to conclude with this, start a movement. AEW captured lightning in a bottle in 2019 by rallying fans around a mission to change wrestling. TNA can do the same by creating a clear identity and engaging fans as partners in its growth. This fan base wants to support you. They want to bring people in. You have the same traveling fans that go to every single pay-per-view. They're always front row. They will support you no matter what. Bring them in. Bring them into the tent. Create a rallying cry. Start a movement. Define your mission. So I just talked about what we're doing in the clinic. We defined our mission. We have specific metrics that we're trying to get after. A goal to hit. And when you do that, and you bring people in and you tell them how they could help you achieve that goal, they want to be a part of that because they want to be successful too. Bring the fans into your mission. Clearly articulate what TNA stands for in 2025. Is it innovation, fan-driven wrestling, storyline-driven action, right? High stakes, whatever the answer is, make it the centerpiece of the marketing. What is your mission statement for 2025? What records do you want to break? Right? Do you want to break the all-time attendance record for a year for TNA? Say that. Bring the people in on that. And they will try to help. They will help bring people into the tent. Engage the audience. And then innovate beyond the ring. Start a movement. You can even use a hashtag, join the movement, right? You have hashtag cross the line, hashtag join the movement. Well, what is that movement, right? AEW's movement is dead. When they came out in 2019, they were, and I've said this before, so I don't, ad nauseum, but they were raging against the WWE machine. WWE had turned the wrestling fans off. with how bad the product was for a long time and with how immoral their owner was. And here Tony Khan came in and he saw the void. Right, TNA essentially was dead in 2019. Impact Wrestling had risen up, but they were nothing. They were just now getting onto Access, but they had been in Pursuit and they got they got canceled off of Pop, and they were doing, small bars and dimly lit venues and, poor production. So they were essentially an indie with a low level television in 2019. AEW came in and filled the void with WWE's massive decline in popularity. And they saw that and they took advantage of it and they were smart about it. Tony Khan had the money. He had the connections to TNT to take advantage of it. He said, there are so many wrestling fans who've been turned off by WWE. Now's the time to strike. And they had all the free agents available to be able to do it because there was already a movement happening with the Young Bucks and with Cody Rhodes and Kenny Omega. The movement was already happening. And then he just hopped on and took advantage of that movement and created an entire wrestling company. Now, what was that movement? Well, we're not going to be WWE. We're going to fill the void left by WWE. We're going to bring the fans in. You guys are going to be a part of this, right? We're going to take care of the wrestlers. We're going to be a moral company. We're going to be a sports-based product. They're saying all these buzzwords that all the wrestling fans have been wanting to hear for so long. And then in 2023, it slowly started to devolve into just another extension of what WWE's been doing. The AEW movement is dead. There is a void. AEW's decline in popularity doesn't mean that there are less wrestling fans. There are just less wrestling fans that are interested in AEW, right? They have seen significant, massive declines because the fans have felt betrayed by AEW because they know that that movement is dead. AEW is becoming 2019 WWE. More and more, week by week, they become their television show is 2019 WWE. Their pay-per-views are still the best. Nobody does pay-per-views like AEW. Their pay-per-views are far and away better than everybody else's. But the movement is dead. TNA can start their own movement. They need to define it. They need to become it. And they need to bring the fans in on it because they will support you. They want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. They do, especially these TNA fans. They love this company. They really do. They will get you where you need to go. You just have to bring them in. All right, guys, that is going to do it for me on Brace, this special edition of Brace for Impact. If any news breaks, I'll be back right here on Patreon. Right back at it. But I'll be back on Saturday morning. TNA, their New Year starts tomorrow on the 2nd. They'll be on Access. And then in 2 weeks, we got Genesis, followed by a live episode of TNA Impact. So keep it dialed right here to Patreon. And until next time, mahalo.